So Gotti made reference to Toyota in the years right after World War II. So let me put some numbers around his description. In 1958, Toyota introduced its first product into the United States. It was a car called the Toyopet. You've probably never heard of the Toyopet. No one in the United States has ever heard of the Toyopet. They sold 3. Maybe 4. Now, here's why they sold 3. The Toyopet, when you turned it on and started driving it, didn't necessarily turn on. If you started driving it, parts started falling off. If the parts stayed on, all right, so you've already crossed 2 critical thresholds. The car starts and stays together. You got to a hill. Now, bear in mind, Toyota's selling cars in California, which has a lot of hills. You get to a hill, and you start going up the hill. You discover your odds are better of going up the hill in reverse. Hey, honey, is there anything behind me? Now, all right. If you live like I do in places with small streets and a lot of stop signs, if you have to turn around to go up the hill, not so bad, but California has freeways. So imagine being on the 1 here or some other freeway where you hold on, stop the track, and got to go backwards. Anyway, that's why Toyota sells 3 cars in 1958, 1959. They don't start, the ones that start fall apart, and the ones that don't fall apart don't go up a hill. So that's 1958, 1959. It turns out if you'd looked at Toyota at that time, again, no one looked at Toyota at that time because the cars were so crummy. It turned out Toyota was awful at making cars. Their productivity in 1958, 1959 was 1/8 that of the Americans. So if it took an American an hour to do labor on a car, it took 8 Japanese hours to do the same labor. It's 1959. By 1962, 1963, Toyota had closed the productivity gap. And so now 1 hour by North American makers was 1 hour by Japanese makers. Now again, no one knew this. And why was that? The memory of the Toyopet. But 1973 comes around, and OPEC does a huge favor to Toyota. I don't think there was any collaboration on this one or collusion, but it was a huge favor. What they did was they raised the price of oil. And Americans are driving along in these gigantic cars. And of course, when oil is, or gasoline is 20 cents a gallon, it's no problem. You pull in, you fill it up. Here's $1. I keep going. When gasoline prices go way up, people say, I can't drive these big cars any further. Toyota says, well, we got little cars because we're in a little country with little streets and little people, and we've got tiny little cars. And so a couple of Americans say, well, buy your tiny little cars as an experiment. They don't remember the Toyopet. They get in these cars, and they're delighted. Because these cars, first of all, they're affordable. That's the productivity deal. And they're driving them along. They're very fuel efficient. And in 1973, there were these enormous fuel lines. You could buy gas only every other day. And once you got online you had to get, and this was the irony, the lines were so long, you had to get online with half a tank of gas. Because you waited so long, you were down to 0. If you showed up, it's like, oh, honey, where's the down to a quarter tank? Forget about it. You can't do it. All right. So anyway, you're on these lines, and then these people in Toyotas are shooting on by, waving, hi, Herb, how you doing? Hey, Sally, how you doing? Because they're getting all this mileage. But there's something else that people discover. Not only are the cars affordable because of the productivity and fuel efficient because of the size, they keep running. They're incredibly reliable. Between 1959 with the Toyopet, which wouldn't start and then fell apart, Toyota had figured out manufacturing and design reliability. And so, shoot on by. So, General Motors doesn't really care about little cars in 1973, because in their mind, you only make money on big cars. So they ignore the subcompact cars. But Americans say, well, we want something a little bigger. Toyota says, well, we can give you a compact car. General Motors ignores that. We can give you a mid-sized car. General Motors ignores that until General Motors realizes they have no sales in the cars division. So this brings us to 1985. And people going over to Japan and trying to understand what's going on inside of Toyota, that they can make cars which are very small, mid-size, and then large and so on, as productively with greater reliability and better affordability than anything the Americans come to market with. In terms of lessons learned, and the lessons learned, you have to understand the question that was asked in 1985 about Toyota. What are they doing that their factories run so well? They run so well because they're productive. They run so well because the quality is good. They run so well because the product is reliable. what are they doing that they run so well? All right, and the reason I'm going to emphasize that question is we're going to come to a very different question later on. But when the question is asked, what do they do when they run so well? The short answer is that they figured out how to take processes which are incredibly chaotic and make them stable. So the first way to make processes which are chaotic and make them stable is take things which are isolated. A department of drilling over here, polishing, paint, shipping, everything isolated, and create a process out of it. Now let me just give a little bit of explanation on this. The traditional approach to organization is organized by function, organized by specialty, organized by discipline. And then, when work comes in, have the work go to the specialist, have the work go to the function where work has to be done. There's good reason for this in a factory. And you see this in high tech. The equipment is very, very expensive. So if you're going to buy equipment, better to buy big things than little things, because you can make a lot more with big things than little things. That's one. The equipment is very complex. So if you're going to buy a complex equipment, put it all together so the experts can sit together and master the equipment, while these experts can sit and master different equipment. Makes a lot of sense. But there's a problem. There's a problem when you put equipment separate, like this. Now, the term in industry is called the job shop approach. Now, just in this room, how many people work in job shops? Well, actually, more than you, I think, realize right now. You'll see. But who has a kitchen at home? Anybody have a kitchen? All right, just keep your hands up in the air for a second. All right, so everybody has a kitchen, unless you're living in a motel. Actually, I've been in places where there are so many good restaurants which I wouldn't have a kitchen, but Boston's not one of them, so we have a kitchen too. All right, who likes to cook? All right, keep your hands up. They're way up for everybody else, for those way up. All right, who likes to cook with their spouse? All right, and a fewer hands. Who likes to cook with their spouse and their kids? All right, we're down to one. All right, so about 1% of the population of the people who like to cook with other people in the kitchen. Now here's the thing about not wanting to cook with your spouse. Most of us, unless we had an arranged marriage, most of us married someone because we loved them so much we wanted to spend the rest of our lives with that person. All right, and that's when you get all romantic, and the flowers and the rings and the wedding and all this stuff. Because I love you so much, dear, except in the kitchen. I don't want you in the kitchen with me. And why don't you want your spouse, again, I love you so much I want to spend the rest of our lives together in sickness and health and richness and poor, whatever it is, forever except for in the kitchen. Why don't you like to cook with your spouse? Why not? We won't share the record. What? Sharp knives. Sharp knives. Yes, but why are the sharp knives a concern? Because they're an idiot in the kitchen, right? I mean, it's true. I don't care, how many degrees your spouse has, how intelligent they are, what they do with the kids or on the job. Doesn't matter if your spouse is an idiot in the kitchen. Because when you go to wash the lettuce, they want to wash the chicken. When you set the oven to 350 degrees Fahrenheit to bake some bread, you show up and it's 425 to broil something. You walk over here and they've taken the mixer and they've got something else in there. I mean, forget about it if you keep a kosher kitchen. Well, all of a sudden you walk in to cook a chicken and it's dairy all of a sudden. All right, forget that. All right, that's not for most people. All right, and you say, my wife, my husband is an idiot. They're always in the way. Well, that's what happens in a job shop approach, that you bring a job in and it's perfectly fine. It's flexible. You take it here, you take it there, it goes over here, it goes over there, until the next one comes in. And the problem when the next one comes in, the red and the blue, is that the red one gets in the way of the blue one, and the blue one gets in the way of the red one. It's just like your spouse in the kitchen. So people go over to Japan, and they discover they've organized their kitchens differently. And again, this is a good crowd. It's like the kosher thing. The dairy's over there, the meat's over there. But it's even beyond that. It's that you walk into a kitchen, and try this at home if you don't like cooking with your spouse, but you like cooking, and say, honey, before you start cooking, what are you going to make? And they tell you what the dish is. And they say, what ingredients do you need? You take them to that side of the kitchen. I'll take my ingredients over here. What equipment do you need? Which forks, which spoons, which spatulas, which ladles. You take yours over there, I'll take mine over here. Do you need the oven? I do. I'll use the toaster oven. Do you need the stove top? I'll take the left burners, you take the right burners. Now, if you do that in the kitchen, trust me, this works. Your spouse is not an idiot. It's amazing. It's like to get a brain transplant just by separating the kitchen in half. People go over to Japan, and remember the motivation is half in, twice out. Well, they discover if you divide up the work and then put the equipment in the order it wants to get used, in the order the product wants to get made, you close the gap on half in, twice out. Before we move on a little bit, everyone has a kitchen. Who's ever gone to a hospital? All right, taken someone to a hospital. Hospitals have this approach. You walk into a hospital, you say, oh man, my knee hurts. Who takes care of knees? And you'll see an orthopedics department. Say, all right, yeah, well, I got those people. But it really hurt. Anesthesia's over here. There's a lot of swelling. I wonder if there's a drug I can... Pharmacy's over here. Boy, I hope someone can really take nursing separate. Bet there's a lot of exercise. Therapy is over here. This is how the typical American hospital is organized, like a job shop. So this job shop is not just kitchens, it's not just Ford, it's not just Toyota. It's very common. There's another big lesson which comes out of looking at Toyota around 1985 to 1990. And again, the idea is, what are they doing that their factories run so well? Half in, twice out, every day. Well, most factories are organized by a schedule. Who works in a scheduled environment? All right, who's got kids? All right, we all have schedules, right? The kids have to be out the door by such and such a time, which means they have to put their clothes. All right, but what's the problem with schedules? Kids are factories.